Hello everyone and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. After some major weather delays, combines finally got rolling across much of Oklahoma this week for what's turned out to be a much later than normal harvest. We begin our coverage today here in this field in Major County. After a good week to 10 days of waiting for dry enough conditions, Jeff Wright is cutting wheat.
It's a challenge.
A field of Gallagher, a popular variety developed by Oklahoma State University and distributed to growers through a partnership with Oklahoma Foundation Seed. As for this year's crop,
I think we'll have seed wheat, but we're going to be rather tight supplies. We're going to have some varieties of Foundation Seed that we'll probably have to allocate, but others I think we may have just enough.
The rain delays mean lower test weights and motivation for grasses and weeds to grow in these thin stands, making it more difficult to cut, which is a common sight around Oklahoma.
This field is very accurate of what I've seen across the state. You know, we've had some good ones, and then we have this one. I'm guessing it's 15 to 18 bushels.
From Chickasha to the south, Newkirk to the north, Sayre to the west, and Okmulgee to the east, the fields Jeff and his team oversee cover a pretty big swath of Oklahoma wheat territory. They'll all be harvested. From here, the wheat's headed back to headquarters at Stillwater to be cleaned, stored, and bagged so it's ready for fall planting.
Just to make sure we've got a pure variety. When we sell a bag of Gallagher seed to the farmer this fall, he knows it's Gallagher because that's what we put on the bag.
Meanwhile, 3 counties to the southeast, a similar harvest for Paul Front and his father Ralph.
The weather has played havoc with me in the last 2 weeks. A situation where we would get a shower maybe every night or every third night, just enough to really put a dampener on harvest and really aggravate you into the fact that you could not get a crop that you had babied along and got it this far and then get it to the bin.
They grew 600 acres of wheat, but are only cutting 150. On a good year, the endurance variety would yield 45 to 65 bushels per acre.
I'm hoping this will be the worst field. We're thinking this field's going to be in the mid to high teens. The rest of my fields, we've got a prediction somewhere in the low 20s.
Paul says he'll make up the difference this year with other crops and a diverse business plan.
Everything in farming has its ebbs and flows, and after the fall and winter that we've had, I guess it's amazing that we've got a crop at all and we are harvesting. I know for a fact my grandfather chased dirt across these fields back in the 30s and the 50s. And so I don't know whether he harvested a crop in 52 or 54, but I guarantee you he would have had a lot worse shape than what we are today.
But thanks to modern farming practices, it's a different picture all these years later. What hasn't changed is the need to work right alongside Mother Nature.
There is some family tradition there, but there also is a drive within people like myself that want to nurture plants and animals. And by doing that, we continue to hold on and do the things that we do and try to figure out better ways of doing it. And so that we can put in another seed next season and start all over again.
Joining us now is Mike Schulte, Executive Director of the Oklahoma Wheat Commission. And Mike, we're in harvest. Give us kind of an update of how far along we are and how producers are doing out there.
Well, we're in the 3rd week of June, Lyndall, and USDA estimates us at around 50% complete in the state of Oklahoma, so we're kind of lagging behind from what we normally would be. And no doubt it's just been a really tough year for producers. Overall crop prospects going into this harvest just were not very favorable looking with the significant drought that we did have in the state, along with the late freeze on April 15th. And now that we've gotten in the field, we're getting all this rain in central and northern regions of the state. And so it's really hindered our progress.
Now, in terms of the harvest overall, we've heard that this is kind of the worst that Oklahoma has seen since 1957. Is that still accurate?
That would be the case. USDA has us estimated. Those new estimates came out last week, and they've lowered the number a little bit again at 59.4 million bushels is what they're predicting for the state. And just based off of what we're seeing and hearing from reports coming in, I think they're probably right in line with those numbers. 1957, we came in at 43 million bushels, and if you look at today's technologies and things, it's really kind of disheartening to the producer out there right now.
We talked about the challenges with drought, which we all know about. We know about the late freeze, but really these last couple of weeks we've seen so much rain, which has been a blessing in a lot of ways, but it's been frustrating at the time that it's arrived, and a lot of people just kind of rained out.
Yes, and I think a lot of the producers were wanting the rains even in the southwest part of the state, even though it was harvest time, because there was such a dire need for the water. But as we've gotten into the central and northern regions of the state, the rains just really haven't stopped, and now the crop is ripe in those regions. And there is, there's concerns that it could impact the quality now at this point in time, and I suspect that that is happening in the field. We just really haven't had a good, run of having producers be able to get in the field for more than a day and a half. So the reports that we have been seeing are not showing any indications on lower test weights in a lot of instances, but if we continue to get the rain, I think that is going to be the case.
Now, for the wheat that has been harvested, how is quality looking?
Before all the rains, we had outstanding quality, which is kind of unusual. That quantity number is the thing that producers are not going to have this year, and so that's not good for them, but quality overall from a marketing perspective, it would be what our domestic and export markets would be wanting. We had extreme high test weights before the rain, anywhere from 59 to 63 pound, and protein qualities exceptionally well in the state. Some of the test weight numbers in the northern regions have dropped a little bit with these past rains these weeks. We've been seeing some 56, 57s. We're hopeful that producers can get in the field before those test weights get any lower. The protein numbers are hanging in there, so we're just hopeful if we could get 4 or 5 days in the field that maybe we could go ahead and get this crop harvested and just move forward without some of the quality issues that might arise.
So what are your predictions on when everything will wrap up, weather permitting, of course?
I never like to predict, Lyndall. I thought that since this harvest started before Memorial Day, in some instances in southwest Oklahoma, that it might be a faster harvest because of all the dry weather we had had. I never suspected that we'd have all this moisture at this time and this would be our issue. But certainly it's going to be a week or two later than what we normally see.
Okay, but as we know, producers are resilient, as is the wheat.
Always in Oklahoma, no doubt.
Okay, Mike Schulte with the Wheat Commission, thanks a lot.
Summer is an especially busy time on most cattle ranches, especially during the haying season. But one of the management procedures that we've got to stay on top of, we can't let fall through the cracks, is monitoring the mineral intake that our cattle need during the course of the summer. This is especially critical if we're providing one of the medicated minerals, one that is meant to prevent the bloodborne disease anaplasmosis. The intake of that mineral on a regular basis is important in terms of preventing the disease. So, during the summertime, I think it's critical that at least once a week we go out and check to see that there's plenty of mineral still in the feeder. Let's do our math and make sure that the consumption or the use of the mineral matches that's on the label for the particular product that we've purchased. For instance, they may want us to use someplace between 2 and 4 ounces per head per day. So as we monitor the usage of the mineral, then we can see if the cattle are consuming that. We need about 1 mineral station for every 30 to 50 cows. And placement of these mineral feeders is important as well. We want it in areas where the cattle are going to congregate on a regular basis, perhaps near a watering hole or a water tank, or in shade where cattle are going to be on a regular basis to make sure that we're getting the mineral intake that's important. Let's monitor this mineral intake at least once a week this summer, and we'll do a better job of preventing the disease anaplasmosis and making sure that the cattle get the minerals that they need for proper nutrition. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
With harvest here, we're reminded of some pretty important laws regarding seed wheat. It's all part of the Federal Plant Variety Protection Act, commonly called PVP. To help us sort it out, here's SUNUP's Austin Moore.
Wheat is evolving.
If you look back over the modern breeding era, which is about 80 to 90 years in the United States, over that time span, the obvious changes that have occurred in wheat to a wheat farmer would be the height. This height is about a foot shorter than what it would have been 100 years ago. But more importantly, it is the yield potential that is bred into these varieties. Given good conditions, we have essentially breeders over that 90-year period have tripled the yield potential. And I think there's room for more growth there.
For each variety, however, there is a lengthy and costly investment of time. A variety will take 10 to 12 years in OSU's wheat breeding program before it is ready for release. From there, Foundation Seed takes over, multiplying the seed before transferring it to Oklahoma Genetics, Inc. to begin the seed distribution process.
With an organization like Oklahoma Genetics, Inc., which is a private nonprofit, every penny of the money that doesn't go to marketing goes back to the university and the breeding program for development of new varieties.
The process for producing certified seed, there's a fairly strict set of regulations that you have to follow. We have the breeder seed, then foundation, then registered, which will be planted, and then certified seed will be harvested from that the following year. Those fields are inspected. They must adhere to strict requirements regarding the prior crop. The field either had to be planted in that same variety the prior year or planted to a different crop to ensure we don't have contamination from a different variety.
So to protect this investment in both publicly and privately bred seed, the Plant Variety Protection Act was created.
Well, the Plant Variety Protection Act, or PVP as it's often called, is a federal statute that was designed to provide some protection to seed variety developers that would give them the right to recoup some of their development costs by giving them a limited ability to restrict the sales of their seed. It's a much shorter, much simpler process to get a PVP certificate than it would be to get a patent. And as a result of that being a shorter and less expensive process, that means that we can get varieties out to growers faster and less expensively than if the developers had to go through the patent process.
Yet in a year like this, with so little seed being produced, it is tempting to try to work around PVP.
Whenever you've got a tough crop year, the following planting season, it always seems like it's much more difficult to find the quality seed wheat that you need. And sometimes people are pulling it from unusual sources. You have seed cleaners that are kind of pulling from a variety of providers. And you need to be really careful about that, because under the Act, if you know or have reason to know that you're purchasing a PVP protected variety from someone who's not authorized to sell it, that makes you liable as well. And seed companies are getting very aggressive about enforcing these issues.
So how do you know if the seed you're buying is protected by the Plant Variety Protection Act? Well, it's right here. Every container of protected seed must be clearly labeled with the type of protection. If in doubt, consult the OSU Wheat Variety Comparison Chart linked off our website. One common misconception is that protected seed must be bought new each year.
If you've purchased that, obviously you can use it to plant your crop that year. But the PVP also has an exception that says you can retain enough seed out of that crop to plant the equivalent amount of acreage the next crop year. So in other words, you wouldn't have to go back to the dealer and buy seed again for your next crop. You could retain enough, and only enough, just to plant back the same acreage in the next season.
However, that may not be the most profitable decision.
Farmer saved seed is not free. There's a value in the market of that seed, so whatever the market price is, you're going to have shrinkage, you're going to have storage cost with that seed. Normally we're looking at $5 or $6 per acre to plant certified as opposed to farmer saved. And for most farmers, it's a good bet. Most of the time, planting certified seed will make you back that bushel per acre 2 or 3 times over at least, in some cases much more than that.
If you'd like to learn more about the Plant Variety Protection Act, visit our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
With all this rain, a lot of Oklahoma producers are wondering when to sell their wheat. And Kim, you got cornered by the Boles from Noble County the other day. What did you tell them?
Well, the question everybody's asking, and they ask, is when do I sell my wheat? And I say now's about as good a time as any. Let's look at a couple numbers. The cash price in Oklahoma, $7 plus in most areas. If you look back at the 6-year average annual price, $6.52, so we're above that. You look at the June price average over the last 6 years, $6.48. Last year this time, or the June average 2013 price was $7.35. So you look at that, $7 plus is a relatively good price as you look back over the last 6 years.
Okay, what is the best month to actually sell your wheat in?
Again, we can look back at history. It does give us an indication of our price range or what could happen, but the 6-year average June price is $6.48. We talked about that. The average July price, $6.52. August, $6.75. September, $6.49. Drops off in October, $6.23, November, $6.22, and December, $5.99. Now these are the prices minus storage and interest. So that tells you any time between June and the end of September is a relatively good time. If you look at last year, you've got $7.35 in June, then it drops off to $6.93, $6.74, $6.61. Popped up in October, average $7.11, then back down to $6.78 and $6.20. Again, harvest is a relatively good time. You did have another opportunity out in the October time period.
Okay, we learned in our economics class there's supply and demand. Let's talk about how that's affecting the wheat market right now.
And I think that's important because this year's situation is a lot like last year. You look at hard red winter wheat, around 200 million bushels, ending stocks projected, the average around 300. All wheat, 574 million bushels, the average 776. Tight stocks, but if you look at foreign, 6.36 billion bushels, the average 6.28 so this year's a lot like last year, and so it's possible our prices track like we did last year. But you know, again, you're depending on the Australian Argentine crops. What's going to happen there? You've got that uncertainty.
Australia, Argentina, a lot of numbers. What does this mean?
Means if you don't want to take risk or you can't afford risk, now it's probably a pretty good price, and I don't think you're going to lose a lot of money selling for $7 or better. If you want to take some risk, I would do a third, and a third, or sell half of it and do a fourth and a fourth, September, October, and November, these time period.
Now we're a lot of numbers, Argentina, Australia, and a third, half, quarter. Got it now. Kim Anderson, grain marketing specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here on SUNUP. Al Sutherland is off, leaving me in charge, and so like a true climatologist, I'm going to bore you with lots and lots of rainfall statistics. But I think that's a good thing since we haven't had a lot to talk about with good rainfall statistics lately. The rains did continue for Oklahoma, as did the drought improvements, as you can see from the latest U.S. Drought Monitor map. And while we still have lots of significant drought across the state, we have still seen lots of changes for the good on the drought monitor since the rains began basically on May 21st. Let's remember how we got here though. It was just a few weeks ago. We can remember this drought map from May 20th, right before the rains began. At this point, over half of the state was either in extreme or exceptional drought, the worst two categories on the drought monitor, and of course it was spreading rapidly to the east, especially in northern Oklahoma. And we can go even farther back and see how we got to these changing points. First, let's look at the rainfall totals for the January 1st through May 20th period, where we had a statewide average of 5.6 inches on the Mesonet. That's a deficit over 7 inches, and that's also the second driest such period on record. Much of the northwestern half of the state has seen less than 3 inches of rain, and actually even farther to the northwest, they had seen less than 2 inches of rain. And for many areas, it was the driest January 1st through May 20th on record. If you look at the departure from normal rainfall map for the same period, we saw localized areas with deficits of over 8 inches and even more than 10 inches. And that's a big reason for the failure of the winter wheat crop, unfortunately. No moisture when it woke up in the spring. Now there was also some freeze problems, but drought certainly had its impacts on the wheat crop. As I said, it did start raining right about May 21st, and the moisture we've had since then is near miraculous. On the other hand, It's not so great in other areas, but for most of the state, especially across north central and southwestern Oklahoma, really great stuff. And we've seen a statewide average of about 5.5 inches since May 21st, and that's about the same amount as we saw through the first 5 months of the year, as I reported earlier. That's a surplus of 1.3 inches and the 24th wettest May 21st through June 17th on record. And you can see from this departure from normal rainfall map, lots of green areas on the state, but the lone remaining area that we're really starting to get concerned about would be southern Oklahoma, which hasn't seen the great rainfalls that the rest of the state has seen. You know, we still have significant drought across much of Oklahoma. As I said earlier, over 75% of the state is in significant drought. This departure from normal rainfall map since the beginning of the year will tell us that story. Basically, we see deficits from a couple of inches in some areas to more than 8 inches in other areas. And again, some of those areas above 8 inches are more than 10 inches. And officially, that's the 7th driest January 1st through June 17th on record. So while we have made great improvements in the drought, we see lots of areas for improvement in the long-term conditions of drought. So we still have a little bit of time left before summer hits, and then the heat and the dry weather normally comes crashing down on us. So let's get some more rainfall before summer hits. That's a good idea. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
We want to talk about cover crops now with our Extension Soil and Water Conservation Specialist, Jason Warren. And Jason, just give us an idea of how your demonstration plots are set up here at Lahoma.
Well, here, this is a demonstration field where we've planted 17 different species of crops that are marketed as cover crops. So we've got everything from radishes to cowpeas to sun hemp, sorghum Sudan, millets, a variety of different things. And what we wanted to see is all of them planted together and see what kind of crop response we would get. Because the idea of using cover crops is that you're going to improve your soil health, so your soil structure, nutrient cycling, microbial activity, that then would benefit the cash crop, being wheat in this case.
And obviously, like a lot of the other crops that we've been talking about, it's clear to see there have been some challenges this year.
Yeah, because with all those benefits come from the green growing crop. So the idea is the more months in the year that you can have a green growing crop in the field, the better the soil health is going to be. The challenge with that is that green growing crops also use moisture. And in our replicated studies, what we find is anywhere from an inch to 2.5 inch deficit on cover crop treatments versus your standard wheat fallow rotation. And a lot of that soil water loss is from the subsoil from below 2 feet, because in fact, depending on what your residue condition is, after you kill the cover crop, you can get recharge to fill that back up. But the drought hadn't allowed us to get that done, and so we see very much drought-stressed wheat in these cover crop plots.
And you've also pulled some soil core today to talk about during your demonstrations. Talk a little bit about what you've found and what your analysis is.
Well, what you'd see, these cores back here, and of course they've dried out in the sun a little bit, but you've got some roots here at about 18 to 2 inches, and you can look around, and at about 2 feet you can start to find some roots, and again they're starting to desiccate to some extent because of being in the sun. But then up here you really don't find, these are cover crop plots, and you just don't see, you see a few dead roots from the cover crops but nothing really going on. And so what's happened is where we cover cropped it, everything is dry, so that's a nice, that's at 3 feet, it's dry. And over here at 3 feet where we didn't have a cover crop, we still have a little moisture where we can crumble that up. So that's the challenge, is the subsoil moisture is gone. The benefit can actually be seen in these cores as well, because the surface of where we have the cover crop is granular and nice and soft and breaks apart real readily at the surface. And that's the benefit of the cover crop. In contrast, we get these big clods and platy structure where we cultivated that ground. It's a little soft, but then it becomes really hard and very dense directly below the surface. And so we are seeing the benefits, but we're not realizing them because of the depleted soil profile moisture.
So Jason, bottom line, what would you recommend doing differently in this type of environment?
Well, what we found, we let these crops grow. We had beautiful growing conditions because we had nice rain in July, and we let them go ahead and grow until mid-August for, actually until mid-September for 30 days prior to October planting date for the wheat. What I'd do differently is I would let them grow to the size I think they want to, or I want them to be, and kill them regardless of where I am in the summertime. Let them grow up, get your cover, get the amount of nitrogen that you think you're going to want to get out of them, and kill them quick. And so every day you'll have more days of potential recharge, because what happened last year is July, we had good rains, and August and September was dry, and so we never got the recharge when we could have killed them in mid-July and got some of those recharging rains to take care of the profile for us.
Okay, so some good advice, lots of things to think about.
Yep.
Jason Warren, thank you very much.
Hi, welcome to Shop Stop. Today we want to talk a little bit about trying to find the center of a piece of round stock.
So a good easy method that you can find is you can typically get these with your adjustable square kits is this little device right here to help you find center.
So all you have to do with one of these is basically just set it on there. You can scribe a line and you can rotate it just any amount. You can rotate it 90 or wherever, but as soon as you scribe your second line, then that point will be in the center. And so then if you've got to drill that, then you've got that marked, you can punch it. And it's a heck of a lot easier than actually trying to take a tape measure and trying to find, okay, where is it and where's my maximum diameter.
All right, so it's a pretty good way to accurately kind of find your center to begin with. So thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on Shop Stop.
And that'll do it for us this week. Remember, you can find us anytime at sunup.okstate.edu. You can also follow us on YouTube and other social media. I'm Lyndall Stout. Best of luck as you finish up harvest, and we'll see you next time at SUNUP.